I was at a graveside service yesterday, and the Lord's Prayer was a favorite of the deceased, and it was read in Aramaic first, which is very interesting, but then we did the traditional Lord's Prayer in English, and I have to tell you that the way we do it here is so personal, it totally feels different, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, this language just feels so freeing to me. So thanks. Today our scripture is an epistle that comes from the Apostle Paul's first letter to Corinth, chapter 12. The body is a unit, though it is made up of many parts, and though all its parts are many, they form one body. So it is with Christ. For we are all baptized by one Spirit into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and we were all given one Spirit to drink. Now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has arranged the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I do not need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable we treat with special honor, and the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has combined the members of the body and has given greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. It happened on July 2nd of 1937, and no, it wasn't the date of my birth. But for those of you who were born then, it was a great year. Actually, it began a month prior as the historic journey to circumnavigate the globe at the equator took place. In 1935, Amelia Earhart was contracted as a visiting professor at Purdue University, counseling women on possible careers, as well as being an advisor to the Department of Aeronautics. Then in early 1936, she began making plans for her last and most challenging flight ever, being the first woman to circle the Earth by taking the longest route at the equator at 29,000 miles. Funded by Purdue in July of that year, she ordered a Lockheed Electra built to her exact specifications, calling for substantial fuselage modifications to accommodate a huge fuel tank. Then in March of 1937, the historic flight began, with the first leg going from Oakland, California to Honolulu. That's from east to west. The flight to Hawaii was successful, although several malfunctions necessitated major service while the plane was at Luke's Field in Pearl Harbor. When finished, Earhart and her two navigators prepared for takeoff once again, only to wind up in a ground loop, meaning one of the front wheels got locked up or something and the thing spun around on takeoff, and it severely damaged the aircraft. The Electra was a mess and had to be transported by sea to the Lockheed facility back in Burbank, California for repairs. But by the summer, the plane was ready to go, and so was Earhart. Along with navigator Fred Noonan, she took off from Miami on June 1st, 1937, to circle the Earth at the equator, this time from west to east. And we pretty much know the story from there, don't we? The first 22,000 miles went as planned and on schedule. Then on June 29th, she landed in Lae, New Guinea near Papua. Their provisions were made for the last and most dangerous part of the journey over the Pacific. And all unessential items were taken off the plane to allow them to get as much fuel as possible on board. So at midnight on July 2nd, the two began their 2,500-mile journey toward Howland Island, a tiny little landmass halfway between Hawaii and Australia. But radio transmissions were sketchy, probably due to a bottom-down antenna thought to have been taken off or sheared off during the takeoff because of the massive payload in fuel. And by 800 miles into the flight, there was no radio contact whatsoever. The naval ship Itasca was stationed at Howland Island with all lights blazing to summon the aircraft to safety, but the Electra never arrived. Within an hour of the failed landing, the search began, calling on the battleship Colorado and many other Navy and Coast Guard vessels. When the search was called off on July 16th, the bill for that search had exceeded $4 million. This is 1937. The most costly and intensive in history up to that day. And despite the 150,000 square mile search, nothing was ever found. Since that time, stories of mystery and intrigue surfaced as to the fate of Amelia Earhart. One is the crash and sink theory. Over the years since the original disappearance, many nautical and aviation experts have studied all the facts of the flight leading up to the disappearance and have concluded that there's every possibility that Fred Noonan, the navigator, had miscalculated the single-line approach to Howland Island airstrip and sent the two off course. There's even speculation that the plane was not fully fueled when it left New Guinea. This fact, along with the slight miscalculation in navigation, was enough to send the plane into the water somewhere off Howland Island. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or TIGR for short, launched a full-scale search last summer on what was the 75th anniversary of the disappearance. Using sonar mapping, this group was able to find the remains of what looked like a crash site, although most of the plane's parts would have disintegrated surely after 75 years at that depth. The findings are really fascinating, I think, but they are not conclusive. So TIGR is committed to more research. Another theory is the Gardner Island hypothesis. Now, TIGR researched this story as well and uncovered some interesting facts. It seems that in 1940, British colonial officer and pilot Gerald Gallagher radioed his superiors, stating that he had found the skull, possibly that of a woman, along with a sextant box under a tree on the southeast corner of the island. The items were sent to Fiji for further analysis. They were analyzed there, misplaced, and they're now gone. Within the last decade, TIGR has uncovered several artifacts there from the island, including improvised tools, an aluminum panel thought to be from the Electra, an oddly cut piece of plexiglass the same thickness and curvature of one of the Electra's windshields, and a size 9 cat's paw heel, which matches the footwear worn by Earhart in most of her flight photos. So from sheer conclusive evidence alone, this might seem the most plausible of the stories. Now another one, which was discounted in 1949 as being unfounded, was the spies for FDR myth. Furthered by the World War II movie in 1943, Flight for Freedom,